Look, there have been plenty of conversations about the future of the Phillies outfield with question marks at each individual position, but one player whose name has not been brought into discussion at a frequent enough rate is Johan Rojas. Once hailed as the center fielder of the future, Rojas has fallen out of good graces with the franchise, and his future now seems in jeopardy. I want to break down the latest reports as it pertains to Rojas, why I think this is incredibly tied to the other factors in this outfield, and why I think it needs to be one decision to sort of lock in the rest of the picture as a whole. Rojas is a guy that we have not heard about in discussions for quite some time. Let's not forget that this year he was still playing a significant role at the start of the season in this outfield, pretty much the everyday center fielder for this Phillies team until the trade deadline came. Harrison Bader becomes a part of this team. There were some moving parts all around, and Rojas essentially ended the year in the minors. Now, I know there was the nice PR spin from Dave Dombrowski speaking about how he picked up a little bit of a groin issue, and that's why there was no consideration to elevating him to the playoff roster. But the bottom line, and I think any way you slice it, is I think Rojas may have blown his chance at becoming a key part of this Phillies team. And the reason that I feel cemented in that take is I want to start off with this headline coming from Phillies Nation. Off-season rumors, Johan Rojas reportedly available in trade discussions. What that says exactly, coming from Matt Gelb, is Rojas is available in trade discussions. Quote, does a reimagined Phillies outfield in 2026 include Johan Rojas? Rojas, 25, is one of the best defensive center fielders in baseball, but has had an OPS under 600 in 530 plate appearances over the last 2 seasons. He would have been on the Phillies' 2025 NLDS roster as a bench player, if not for a quad injury suffered at the end of the AAA season. According to The Athletic's Matt Gelb, Rojas is available in trade discussions. The Phillies could go in a number of different directions in center field. Dave Dombrowski told reporters at this week's GM meetings in Las Vegas that the team is comfortable with Justin Crawford in center field, despite major questions about his ability to stick at the position. Brandon Marsh could also open up the season in center, although he is a stronger defender on the corner outfield spots. Perhaps the Phillies pursue a reunion with Harrison Bader in a multi-year deal, or sign a bounce-back candidate such as Cedric Mullins to a 1-year deal. Now, to interject here, I understand the position from the organization about, it's because of the injury for why he was not on the postseason roster. I think the reality is, and maybe you can make a case that he would have gotten one of those bottom-tier bench positions and used him as a pinch runner in certain spots, but there was no vision for Johan Rojas as being a part of that team, and I think we can all acknowledge that up front. As far as him being in trade conversations, I don't think that is that relevant, because every player has a price, and certainly there are the untouchables, the Shohei Ohtanis, the Bryce Harpers, the Kyle Schwarbers, guys like that. Johan Rojas is certainly not under that umbrella. That does not mean necessarily that they are actively trying to trade him, but there is certainly a team that if they paid whatever premium Dave Dombrowski has in mind, he would be willing to send him to that organization. But what I do think is notable is what we can take from the conversations for the outfield that have been put on public display. And where that conversation starts, to me, is right here with Justin Crawford. The quote that Dave Dombrowski gave out regarding his status as a center fielder is, quote, he struggles with certain things compared to others, but he's improved. His speed makes up for maybe the quickness of a jump like Johan Rojas would have. We feel confident. And this regarding him in center field, and the bat theoretically is better for Justin Crawford than it is for Johan Rojas. Now, Rojas is a guy who certainly had to overcompensate with his defensive ability for his shortcomings at the plate. And depending on the context of the team, that did make sense. When we were talking about Nick Castellanos, his bat being red hot at the plate in right field, and when there were the moments where Kyle Schwarber was playing left field, a guy like Rojas made a ton of sense for being able to cover as much ground as he can. That is no longer the context of this Phillies outfield. Now, the problem with that is we don't exactly know what the context of this Phillies outfield is, but one conclusion that I did come to when sorting through all of this is my level of confidence in Harrison Bader coming back has certainly sunk a little bit. And the reason that I say this is that commitment to Justin Crawford being the center fielder. Now, Bader can play the corners, absolutely, but that is a guy that you watch him play baseball, and he is a center fielder. And I would think in Harrison Bader's head that he wants to be a center fielder for the foreseeable future. Now, to touch on Bader directly and highlight what he brought to the table this year, it was a career year for the 31-year-old. He posted 17 home runs, the most of his career, 54 RBIs, a .347 on-base percentage, had 448 at-bats. 124 hits across them, posted a .449 slugging percentage. He was exactly what this Phillies team needed at the trade deadline, even more so than I think any of us anticipated at the time. The problem now is, what is the future vision? And the Crawford conversation is sort of seeming to me to be the foundation of all these decisions. Now, whether that is right or wrong is purely determined on how good Justin Crawford is. I don't think you can argue with the results that we've seen at the minor leagues to this point, but I also sort of come at it from a skeptical angle of, if he was this ready, if he was this good, then why have we not seen him to this point? I really did think that there were several opportunities to bring up Justin Crawford to the major league team last year and prove what he can do. We lived through the struggles of Max Kepler. We saw Nick Castellanos not quite live up to the expectations. And to touch on what Castellanos exactly brought to the table, his stats last year, looking at his age 33 season, 547 at-bats, posted 17 home runs, 72 RBIs, 32 walks, 137 hits, and 133 strikeouts, a .294 on-base percentage, which is just not quite good enough, a .409 slugging percentage. That is not quite the $20-ish million man that his contract indicates him to be. As far as Nick Castellanos directly, all we've been told is essentially the door is shut on his future in Philadelphia. The latest that we do have, coming from Scott Lauber of the Philadelphia Inquirer, says, speaking to reporters at the general manager meetings on Tuesday, Philadelphia Phillies president of baseball operations, Dave Dombrowski, once again addressed the situation surrounding Nick Castellanos. Although the outfielder has a year remaining on his contract, Dombrowski did not comment on having Castellanos on the 2026 roster at the end-of-season news conference in Philadelphia last month. Dombrowski's latest comments in Las Vegas continue to make it seem like Castellanos could certainly end up on another club next season. Quote, "I did speak with Nick," Dombrowski said. "I had a lengthy conversation with him. I think we're just kind of open-minded for discussion purposes, but sometimes change of scenery can be beneficial for people too. And that is the nicest way that I think you could possibly put, I'm trading this guy." Castellanos struggled in the field and at the plate in 2025, turning in his worst full season as a major leaguer. He was benched as a punishment for something he said to manager Rob Thompson in June, and lost playing time down the stretch due to his performance. The right fielder expressed frustration with both his diminished role and with Thompson at different points. He hit 17 home runs with a .694 OPS in 147 games. The Phillies could look to move Castellanos, who hired a new agent this offseason in a salary dumping trade. Maybe they could even release him if they can't find the right deal. It just doesn't appear likely that Castellanos will be back in Philadelphia after the way this year played out. Now, as far as Castellanos as a whole, you guys know I've been pretty defensive of him. I have a hard time being overly critical of a guy whose biggest criticism is, I want to play more baseball. I want to be out there more frequently. And by the way, he played 147 games this year. It's not like this guy was completely put on the shelf. He had a ton of opportunities. I believe he finished the year third in at-bats on this team, or in that range, certainly in the top 5. That's a lot of chances that he did have. So I do think it's fair to critique that he did not handle himself in quite the ideal way from a team construct. But I do think we should acknowledge right up front that the door is seemingly shut on him returning to the Phillies. But then that brings up the question of who is replacing him. And a guy that I do think is coming to play here is Stephen Kwan. Now, I know we talked about this guy at the deadline quite a bit. The reason that I bring this up is this report coming initially from Jim Bowden that says the Guardians are open to trading Stephen Kwan this offseason. To address Kwan directly, he's not exactly what we're looking for from a Phillies perspective. To highlight his stats on the year, he had 11 home runs, 56 RBIs, a .330 on-base percentage across his 625 at-bats, a .374 slugging, had 170 hits, 21 stolen bases, just 60 strikeouts. And that's the biggest number that I do want to highlight, those strikeouts. When talking about the context of this Phillies team, and again, a lot of this is moving parts at this point. If you're going to have a guy like Bryce Harper and a guy like Kyle Schwarber, who for all intents and purposes will be back on this Phillies team, you have to surround them with contact hitters. I think that is an essential part of the game plan moving forward, and Kwan directly is that. Now, he's a left-handed bat, which isn't ideal, but to contrast that with a guy like Nick Castellanos, who obviously has spent stretches batting behind these guys, 133 strikeouts and 547 at-bats for Nick Castellanos compared to 60 strikeouts in 625 at-bats for Stephen Kwan. Even Harrison Bader, 136 strikeouts across 448 at-bats. That is a huge jump there. Now, I wish Kwan had a little bit more pop. I do like the way that he plays the field. I do really like him as a baseball player. That is something that intrigues me. If we're talking about Stephen Kwan, if we're talking about Justin Crawford, and then potentially a right-handed power bat, maybe better than Nick Castellanos, that is something that starts to move me as what this outfield picture could completely look like. Now, as far as that right-handed bat in particular, it is easier said than done. And Dave Dombrowski will be the first one to take that head on as he spoke with Matt Gelb in another portion of this quote. Quote, somebody just asked me earlier, well, do you want to get a right-handed outfielder? Well, yeah, I do, Dombrowski said, so do a lot of other people. And where do I find them? It's not easy to do. That's just what our jobs are. That's why we have jobs. So it is easier said than done, but the wheels are in motion. And I do think Johan Rojas as a potential trade chip is a little bit more of a relevant part of this entire equation than I think has been given credence to this point. Stephen Kwan is probably the most, I guess, excited I've been about a potential part of this outfield plan. Maybe it could even be a Stephen Kwan, Harrison Bader, Justin Crawford outfield. I don't love it. That's not like I'm all the way in. This team is winning the World Series next year. But I feel better about that outfield unit than what started the season last year. And again, there are a ton of moving parts, a lot of conversation to be had. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What is your ideal outfield for this Phillies team? Am I just completely underselling the Kyle Tucker outlook? Is that something that you guys are interested in? Let me know. Give your thoughts below. Drop your comments because this is a massive decision that's going to define this entire offseason.